Welcome to the Introverted Influencer Podcast. I'm your host, Erica Van Slyke. My soul's mission on this planet is to help fellow introverts grow their online influence in a state of feminine flow and ease. While battling the woes of depression, anxiety, and even mom guilt, I've somehow managed to build a six-figure blog without the use of social media and without sacrificing my mental health. If I can do it, you can fucking too. Hello, my love. Welcome back to episode 49 of the Introverted Influencer Podcast. You are in for a treat today. It is a special day. I felt like a kid in a candy shop because I got to interview the first energy healer on this podcast. And I don't want you to write this off if you are here more for the business aspect, which I don't think you're strictly business anymore. If you've gotten into episode 49 of this podcast, you know by now that so much of success in our lives, our careers, our relationships, our businesses are about the energetic work. But she has made this her life's work. Natasha Levinger. She is an energy healer. She is a mentor for those looking to get into healing. She writes a monthly energy report for Mind Body Green. She has specialized in inner child healing, and she has a book coming out in April called Healing Your Inner Child. So obviously, we discuss so much about the importance of healing our inner child because that is basically, we don't realize it, but that's what drives our subconscious. And our subconscious is what ultimately creates our reality. And so even if you're like, my childhood wasn't that bad, if you get triggered, that is your inner child. If you have a fear of being seen, perhaps, maybe you're afraid that people are going to reject you on social media if you have to show up as yourself for your business. That is your inner child. So just know this stuff is important. Not only is Natasha an energy healer, mentor, and author, she is also a host of a really, really fun and entertaining podcast, Getting to Know Woo. Is that not the best freaking title? Freaking love it. And so her podcast really, what she says, I said prove. She said she's not here to prove anything to the skeptics. She is just trying to normalize all of these alternative healing modalities. So obviously we get into other healing modalities that are aimed to regulate the nervous system, clear out trauma from not only the energy body, but the actual physical body. And we also talk a lot about self-compassion and developing trust in yourself. And I hope you will really get a sense of how this does relate to business, as well as just your own healing in general and healing in your relationships. And I'm going to stop rambling on and I'm going to go ahead and let you hear this really awesome interview with today's guest, Natasha Levinger. Hello, Natasha.
Hello.
I'm just so excited because you are my first intuitive energy healer on this podcast, which I'd originally started as more of like a business podcast. And now I'm just down the rabbit hole because I feel like energy is so much more important than any business degree,
Mm,
any even any therapy that I've ever had. Just it's been life changing for me. So I'm excited to like geek out with
yeah,
all
me
things
too.
woo
Yeah.
with you.
Cool. I'm excited.
So, since you're on this podcast, the Introverted
Yes.
Influencer, I want to ask, are you an introvert yourself?
Oh, yes. I'm highly introverted. Yes. And whenever
Okay.
I take those tests, there's never any question about it. Although it is a little frustrating for me because I'm also very social, which sounds like the opposite. Like I have a desire for a very strong desire for connection and um meeting like I don't know, like I guess friends and like and also I like to meet people. I do, but I just get drained pretty quickly.
Yes.
It's like
Yes.
I need to, yeah, recoup after. But I do that. It has always been really frustrating for me because I'm like, I do like I have a desire to be social. Like my husband could care less if he ever like leaves the house again. and,
Uh-huh.
and or talk to people or whatever, but I'm not like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure having your podcast is nice too because you get to connect with people. That's what I found. I thought that I didn't need connection, but
Mm.
I realize after I leave these interviews, I feel recharged
Oh,
actually.
yeah,
So maybe I
yeah,
do need it.
yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, that's a good way to tell.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to hear all about your spiritual awakening and your self development journey that led you to becoming an inner child healer and energy reader.
Yeah. So, I also have ADHD, so sometimes,
I do too.
oh, okay, good. You may relate, like, sometimes with, like, big questions like that, I'm like, it's all like, "Where do I even begin?" It's so broad, but, I
Yeah.
mean, I guess we could start with the beginning, which is that I was, um, raised my mom was a very big narcissist, and my dad was also, but I without going too much into narcissism, oftentimes there is like a golden child and a black sheep. So there's one person that can do no wrong and another person that just gets all of the awfulness dumped on them. And so it wasn't for a long time, like actually very recently, that I realized that my dad actually was also a narcissist, but I was just his golden child. So I wasn't aware of it as much. He also wasn't around much, but anyway, I mean, because he traveled. But it was just very hard growing up with my mom because I was her target. It was just a very traumatic experience. And it's a lot like living with an alcoholic. I was just always I never knew what to expect. Like I said, I was just her target. But anyway, long story short, maybe, after a period of depression, I realized that um, if I was going to be here on earth, and I was 16 at the time, that I needed to find ways to help myself feel okay. And so I also lived in Northern California, which was very open to like woo stuff. Like a friend
Mhm.
took me to a psychic when I was 15. It was like all of that was very normalized, which I think was super helpful. I think a lot of times we overlook how much our like the world we live in affects us and in so many ways. But anyway, in that way, it was very supportive, the system I grew up in that way. And I just started reading self-help books. I started reading the best one was this channel. It's called Living with Joy by Sinea Roman, and she channels this being Orin. And that really opened me up to the idea that I could also do that. That I have a connection, that we all have a connection to spirit, to guides, and it's not just like for the special chosen ones. I'm also a Pisces rising, which for those not familiar, it's like it's a sign that's connected to basically the spirit world. And it's like you're much more comfortable in those worlds than in your body, oftentimes.
Mhm.
So anyway, that's where that started. And then when I was I really am taking you through the whole journey, but when it won't take this long. But when I was 21, I went into a real depression because I didn't know. I mean, I was processing all this. I was blaming myself for my mom's stuff. I didn't know that she was a narcissist. And actually went to an inner child therapist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so that was helpful, but it actually it just kind of opened me up to the idea of what that was.
Mhm.
Um she wasn't super helpful in like giving tools and stuff. She was just basically like, "Well, did you talk to your inner child?" And I was like, no." And then
Okay,
maybe
well, at least you have like a head start on this because the first time I heard of inner child was through Lacey's work.
Oh, okay.
So you were way ahead of the curve.
Oh yeah, I definitely learned about it a long time ago. So yeah, so I had that concept, um, which did help, but then later I was like, you know what? I really want to do this. I want to learn how to do energy healing for myself because I would often go to intuitive readers and I was like, I know I can do this. I want to learn it. So I went to a program. Well, I at the time this was like pre-internet being like where all the millions of classes are.
Mhm.
So I called the school that was in San Francisco. I was in New York at the time, and they hooked me up with a teacher so that went there. And so I she taught me and a friend for 3 years, just one-on-one, like every week, the skills that I do now, the tools that I do now to read energy, to clear energy, to um all the like reading past lives, et cetera, et cetera. And the biggest thing that surprised from it was how much it helped me in my life practically. Like it actually helped heal a lot of my ADHD symptoms, like the forgetfulness and things like that. But anyway, so I learned all of that. And then when I started doing it for other people professionally, what I found out happened was that I would see the inner child in basically every when anyone had an issue, I would be like, oh, well, looking at the core, I would look at the core of their energy in the chakras, and I'd be like, well, that's an inner child wound here. And I would talk to them about that and I would clear it, but it would be like, well, it's great that they can clear that I could like clear up this issue with them, but they would still need to learn how to do it from there. Like they would still,
Mhm.
it's not like a one and done situation. Like you can feel a lot better, but from doing Lacey's work, it's like a lot of times these inner child wounds, they need connection. You need to have this ongoing relationship with your inner child.
Yes, that's what I'm finally learning. I thought it was like a one and done thing.
Oh,
And going
yeah.
back through her work and going through that challenge. Whereas,
Mm,
like, the shadow work was the most profound for me when I started
mm,
doing this work. For anyone
yeah.
who doesn't know what I'm talking about To Be Magnetic by Lacey Phillips. It's how Natasha and I actually met. We
Yeah.
do the work. And it was like the shadow work. And this year, well, we started in December. The inner
Yeah.
child was so profound.
Mm,
I thought I'd worked through so much. And
yeah.
it's like, wow, I do have to continually go back to that. Mine
To
is
the
more teenager, but
Well, so that's the thing is like there's we have many different parts. I mean, it's like we look like we're one unified being, one unified voice, but anyone knows you're talking to yourself all day long, and lots of times those are different parts that you're talking to.
mhm,
So we don't just have an inner teenager and inner child. We have, many different parts. And all of those parts actually want the best for us, even if it feels like they don't. So knowing them and building up a relationship, a secure attachment really with different inner child parts. It's not like you have to know every single one in order to do this, but you will know based on what is your strongest feeling you're having right now. Like if you're having a trigger, a big emotion comes up, there's an inner child there that wants your attention, where you can build the secure attachment, and then all of that can ease up. And especially if you're just like basically being kind to yourself is being kind to your inner child parts. Like they feel it, they
Mm-hmm.
hear it, they, seeing yourself, being seen, validating yourself, all of that is connecting to these parts. So I guess, did that answer your question? That's what
Yeah.
that was my spiritual journey.
Well, I'm kind of jealous of you because you were in that environment that really facilitated all of that a lot easier versus like where I'm at,
What do you
Tennessee,
mean?
the South. So
Oh,
it's a
yeah.
little different. So a lot of these concepts are newer to me, but
Well, but now you have the internet
yes,
because,
thank God.
yeah, I mean, it's not, believe me, the environment I was in was very, not good. It was fractious and unhealthy, but it just allowed me to see. It's kind of like now, you have Instagram, you have the internet, so like you're exposed to it that way.
Mhm.
Um, and there's people like you connect with through the work, through, like meeting me. So that's the same thing, really.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and call myself out.
Mm.
When I was getting into the work, I was very reluctant to do inner child healing because I'm like, that is kind of frivolous. Like, I
Oh,
am
interesting.
trying to keep my head above water with my children
Yeah.
and trying to grow my business and try to kind of make ends meet. It was kind of like lower
Interesting.
on the Maslow's hierarchy. And so I just thought, I don't have time for this. Like, when I'm in a better place, then I'll work through this because
Right.
I had been hearing about the inner child. And I even thought, okay, I went through some trauma in my teens, but my earlier childhood, it wasn't that bad. And so it's
Mhm.
like I'm not a victim. Like
Right.
I don't know that I really need this. What
Mm.
would you say to someone like that who's maybe thinking the same thing, like, oh, my childhood wasn't that bad, or I've got bigger things on my plate. I don't need this inner child healing.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, again, what I feel like it all comes down to is that you're already talking to your inner child all the time. You just don't have consciousness around it. So if you're feeling, I mean, first of all, it's very true if you, like are struggling to make ends meet or something like that, you're not going to have the resources or time to like go to a therapist. But you can, if the underlying issue, let's say, is feeling really overwhelmed, let's say that, like in your case, you have kids that are, it's just like, we call those battlefield conditions in our house, like when the
Oh.
kids are sick or something, like it's like, I can't do anything. But what you do have control over is how you are, your mindset, you could say, but I like to think of it as like really it's more holistic than that. It's how you are treating yourself within that overwhelm, because how your nervous system is reacting. So if you are, let's say, overwhelmed and your nervous system is highly activated and you're meeting it with anxiety, you're going to feel terrible on top of already your circumstances. But if you
Mhm.
can know how to, okay, I can at least within find ways to create peace so that I can handle what's going on around me, then with more peace, then you're going to be able to handle all of it better. And inner child healing is an amazing way to do that. And I always say, like, I really prefer healing modalities that you can do in small amounts. Like it doesn't take like, okay, I have to go lay down for even a half an hour and meditate, or I have to go for a run every day in order to feel sane. These kind of things where you're connecting to your inner child, once you do it, you can just do it in small amounts. Like when I'm driving to the store or something, I'll check in with myself. Or if I'm having, let's say I'm triggered, I can talk to this inner child part. I can put my hand on my heart, take a breath, and then say, okay, what am I needing? What is this part of me needing right now? And those kinds of things will help calm you so your outside circumstances feel more manageable.
Manageable. Yeah, that's what I've really noticed this time around doing the inner child work a few months
Mm,
ago. Hardcore is like now I don't need to go and have a hypnosis meditation to realize that it's really my inner child being triggered in the moment. And I'm like, so
yes.
do I really need to go through all that hypnosis when I'm kind of aware now and I feel like I can slow down and see, be the observer and
Right.
know that this is totally my inner child coming out. And that's why I'm triggered in
Right.
the moment.
Well, what you're noticing in the moment, what that means is that you have more of your inner adult present. You have more of your true self present, so you can notice, oh, that's a part of me that whatever, I'll find out what it needs and move on. And no, in that case, you wouldn't need the hypnosis in order to identify it. But where I do think it's really good, and Lacey has a bunch of these, and I do too, is where is the reprogramming for later. Like, so because as you know from Lacey's work, but I'm also in a hypnosis program now. So, because I got so into it, I was like, oh, I want
You'll
to
have to
learn more.
share that with me because I really do want to learn more about it
Okay,
too.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
really fun. Although now, of course, I'm also into the like how powerful the body, like just being present in the body. If you can just be present with enough of that inner adult and let the feelings go through you, it's almost like you really don't need the mind. But with what I was going to say is, you know, that from 0 to 7, it's where we're programmed all of how we relate to people, how we see the world. And then that goes into our subconscious. And then as adults, excuse me, 99% of how we react comes from that. So
Mm-hmm.
our brain our brain isn't constantly recalibrating. Well, how do I feel safe here? No, they go back to when you how you handled um feeling safe when you were little, which often, and that's your inner child, and oftentimes that's really unhelpful because the inner
Mm-hmm.
child is often that was formed in situations where they didn't have control. But anyway, what was I saying about, oh, but so the hypnosis is good for reprogramming. So for to let's say you had and when you were little you were taught that your needs didn't matter, it is really helpful to go back and experience, like imagine, oh, my needs matter, like imagine a scenario where your mom picked you up and like told you your needs always matter, something like that, because that does rewire your brain so that later you won't be triggered.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that, it sounds like for a lot of things you don't need it to identify the core wound, but to repattern, then it's helpful.
Yeah. And I I've got this, I'm trying my best to work through it. It's this memory of being told like you are evil, you are bad because when
Oh
I
my
was little
gosh.
I was a little shit. I was super impulsive and I was very mean to my little sister. And
Mm,
I would like hit her. And there is that was bad. It's kind of
mhm.
like that duality of like, I didn't know better,
Well, yeah.
but, and then I internalize I'm bad, I'm unlovable, people don't like me. And I can see how that would even be affecting me in what the work I'm doing now, this fear of rejection and fear
Right.
of criticism that when I put myself out on social media or wherever, it's like I'm already creating that narrative for myself. Could you talk
Yes.
more about that? Because I think a lot of people who listen, they're interested in having a presence online.
Mhm,
So I want them to
mhm.
see the connection of how it's not just in your relationships that this can come out. This is your day to day. This is your career. It affects
Yeah.
everything.
Well, if you have that belief that you are evil, and before I do want to get back to that, but if you, I don't believe kids are bad and evil. So if you are hitting your sister, and then did one of your parents tell you you were bad? Yeah. So if
It was in
you're
a
in,
moment of passion, they were
well,
pissed. I hurt my sister pretty bad. So,
yeah, I don't know. I will believe that it is highly likely you were frustrated, you weren't being given the tools for how to handle your anger. Like maybe that parent really did look at anger as being evil and bad, and so didn't give you tools to how do you handle that anger.
Which probably resulted in my ultimate depression, because
Yes.
you shut down the anger because you feel
That's
like you
right.
cannot handle those scary emotions. So
Right. And if you
all
were
this is
told
coming out.
Yeah, and if you were told your anger is bad and you are evil, of course you're going to shut that down. It's not safe to feel that. So I don't believe that you actually, yes, your behavior wasn't good, but you were also a child. I mean, sometimes there are children that are, for whatever reason, even with good parenting, act out like that. But they still aren't evil and bad. They need help to figure out what's going on here. There's many different
Mm-hmm.
reasons for that. But anyway, yeah, I mean, you said it great. It's like if you are feeling scared of being judged on social media, which I mean, who doesn't? It's like that whole thing was designed for that. But there is, I mean, some of it is just naturally human. We're pack animals. We want to be liked, we want to be validated. I mean, there is so much of it that's just normal and human. But if it's chronic, if it feels like, oh, like if it's stopping you from posting, or if every time you're beating your inner critic gets really loud, then definitely there is a source underneath that. And it doesn't mean you have to have had bad parents. It could have been
Mm-hmm.
anything. But I also think, we can say our parents didn't do a good job if they really did. Like some of us, like me, just really had parents that were not responsible. And that doesn't mean I'm like, she was a terrible like person. I mean, I think she was a really bad mom, but I think there's a lot of in our society, especially with moms. I'm going on a tangent here, but it is important. But I mean, I think it stops a lot of people from really owning their experience because they're afraid to say that their parents didn't do a good job with things,
Mm-hmm.
and they can both be human and flawed and have not done a good job. And you can forgive them at some point if you want to, but it really is important to own that. But anyway, like I said, you said it best. It's like there is a core, there's often something underneath it. If it's that kind of like, oh, everybody hates me, like you found your source there. Um, but I also, yeah, anyway. Um, yeah, and I definitely had that too. Like my mom said something explicitly about people not liking me, which really wounded me for a long time. And so then I'm still doing a lot of work around that, around being liked by like groups of people.
Mm.
So there's work you can do, and it also like it can be fun, and it can be like it doesn't have to be like I said this whole thing. It can just be like, "Oh, I'm really feeling like." You can ask yourself, "How old is this part of me that's afraid right now to post?" And then you can imagine pulling that part out of you, and it's them sitting there with you, and figure out like or ask them, what do you need from me right now? And often it's just like, I need to know that you love me, that you, the person, um in front of the inner parent loves me. And that often, if you can unmerge from that part enough, that really solves a lot of it. That can bring your nervous system down, because there's so much projection onto the world that can really be healed by inner connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's crazy how much lighter I feel too after doing this work. We don't realize how much we carry around. And
Yes,
we don't realize it's affecting our present, but it's
so
yeah.
much. I mean, I actually, to put a plug in there, I have a book coming out, or I don't know when this is coming out. Maybe it already came out.
I think it'll come out Friday.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so this is good timing. I have a book called Healing Your Inner Child that's coming out April 18th. And I created a class actually around what we were just talking about, which is inner validation for people who pre order, or you don't have to, you can just get it. But um, what I found was that a lot of times in those situations when we're wanting external validation, the inner child is kind of energetically, if you tune into them, you can see they're looking outside. They're like trying to get approval by looking around them. And if you just turn them to face you, it can
Mhm.
make a huge difference. So I call that the inner gaze versus the external gaze.
Oh wow. Okay, so you're looking, your inner child is looking at your adult
That's
version.
right.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
right.
When I
Thank you.
go back in hypnosis, it's always me looking out at an audience or okay.
Right. Yeah, that happens a lot for those of us who are trained to, like, in those situations, feel like people don't like me, or like because they're looking for safety. They're looking for this approval so that they can calm down and feel safe. And they don't know that, oh, if they turn towards you, and it may sound funny if you've never done this before, but if you tune in, you can, even if you can't see a child, you can sense energetically, or you can might most people can do this, sense like, okay, are they turned out or towards me? And it really does create a huge shift, because a lot of
Okay.
times they don't even know you're there. So another good question to ask is, do you know I'm here? Because, like, do you know the adult is here?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they're projecting not just on random people, but they are really trying to get the approval of a caretaker they grew up with. And so they don't know. They're so focused. This energy is so focused on a caretaker, they don't even know, oh, wait, there's actually an adult here who could be caring for me.
Mm-hmm. And God, I just can only imagine how much more the adult version of yourself could truly connect with your authenticity and what you really want when you're focused more at your. I love that. That's a instead of looking out and seeing, well,
Yeah.
what does this person want from me? What does that person want? I
Right.
could see how you would get so much more clarity.
Well, your inner adult is always your authentic self. You know, that part of you is always there, always present. It's just many times where I always say that your goal can be to have your inner adult be the loudest voice in your head, because that is your true self. But it's often we don't realize it until we start to put consciousness on it, how much it's actually the inner child's voice at different ages, or even the inner critic is an inner child.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. That's a good point too that I'd never thought of, the inner critic.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's also I found this out later. There's a therapy model called internal family systems. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically, it is inner child work. It's called parts work. Um,
Okay.
and I found it after I was doing all of this. I was like, oh my God, they have a whole system, and it's called internal family systems, which is parts work, and it's dealing with all your parts. And there's a book by a guy, I forget his name, but it's called No Bad Parts. My book also talks about this too, but the idea being that all of these parts, even the inner critic, really do want our good. Like, it is an inner child that just doesn't know how. It's a child. So they
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to care for us. And that's how they think they're going to get our attention.
Okay. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to shift more to the energy healing part of this because,
Sure.
well, first of all, I want to give people an idea of what is energy healing? What does a session look like with you if you're interested?
Yeah.
And yeah, let's start there.
Yeah. So just FYI, I'm actually taking a break from individual sessions. I'm just doing mentorships right now, but it's still helpful to know. So, and I do that in the mentorship, but so energy healing, it's like such an umbrella term. And I also have a podcast called Getting to Know Woo, which is basically, the reason I started it was because all of this is, there's just so much negativity attached to woo, and it's really changed my life. Even Lacey will often be like, it's not woo. And I'm just like, well, why
I know
not?
when she says that, I'm like, so what if it works? It works.
Exactly. Exactly.
No, your
There.
podcast is great. It's so
Oh,
juicy. It's
thanks.
like all the interesting topics. It's
Oh, thank you. So yeah, so the reason I bring that up is because um energy healing is just such a huge term, and I think part of that is because of the negativity around it. But anyway, um in my work, what I do is, the way I like to describe it is, if someone isn't familiar with what energy it like how this would even work, I like to say, like, imagine someone's coming up behind you. If you have that feeling, that feeling of like you haven't turned around, but you can sense them behind you. That's energy. That's you sensing the energy. So everybody has a sense of energy. It's just in our society, it's been turned down as being like, well, again, that's woo. That's not,
Mm-hmm.
that's not real because I can't see it. But so I look at the chakras, I look at the people's energy field. So it's kind of like I've been told it's like therapy on steroids, where it's like someone will come with an issue and then I'll look into their energy. It sounds worse than that sounds like I'm like, I mean, they give me permission. And also, I should say, I can only see what someone allows me to see. I have extremely solid boundaries, and I know if somebody doesn't want me to see something, I do not dig. And also, I can't see it. Like, people will often, they'll just put a shield up, and I'm like, well, can't see that. But generally, if someone's coming to me, they want me to see. So I look in and I see like the pictures, the beliefs that they're having around them, that don't, the subconscious patterns, the subconscious beliefs that aren't working for them anymore. I'll often see past lives that might be, that have, created, they came into, my belief is they came into this lifetime to heal patterns from past lives. So we'll de energize that, look at family contracts. We can look at people, if you're having an issue with someone, to see what's coming up in you, that's creating the trigger, and get some more insight. Again, I can't see, even on a being level, I will look at people who aren't, if someone brings up, let's say you bring up your husband, I'll look at him, but I only see what he on a being level would be willing to show me. So that happens, it's more frequent that I'm like, he doesn't want me to look at him. um, not it, and that's not even super frequent, but it's more frequent that if you bring someone in to the discussion, that they might be hiding their energy. But anyway, so yeah, so that's what I do, and I also really like to give tools for the, like I said, I healed a lot of my ADHD stuff just from energy tools, just from being more
Mm-hmm.
aware of my energy. I say one thing that's very common with people is that come to see me is they can't tell. They're often empaths, or take on other people's energy, and it's hard for them to tell the difference between theirs and other people's. And so clearing that out and also having tools for that really helps with that issue.
Okay, that's the perfect segue.
Mm,
So, I think a lot of newcomers to all of this, to the self-development, to changing your mindset and rewriting your subconscious beliefs, and you're feeling lighter and you're feeling more optimistic, and you've changed the way you look at the world, but you cohabitate with people
yeah.
that are still not open to it.
Yeah.
Um, for me, what I'm sensing this month is that a lot of conflict and struggle that I've carried with me for the past year, it's dissolving. I feel in a really good place energetically, even though it hasn't crystallized into,
Like
3D
physical items.
physical, but I'm feeling
Yeah,
great. But
that's great.
I'm noticing that I'm picking up on some energy in the household,
Mhm.
heavier energy.
Yeah.
And I feel guilty to feel good when my
Mm,
loved ones are struggling. And
yeah.
so I can feel that guilt. And then I feel myself closing myself off and
Mm,
almost self sabotaging from the good that I feel is flowing into my life. Cause it's like, how can I be happy when others around me are not, especially
yeah.
those that I love? Do you
Yeah.
have tips for working through that? Like, that's a selfish
Yeah.
question for me, but
That's okay. I mean, that's just not just, but that's codependency, right? You're feeling
okay.
responsible for them.
Yeah.
And, and also to bring this out bigger picture, it's also, I mean, I often get triggered a lot by the world crises. It's like I'm
Hmm.
sitting here feeling I'm living a really happy, good life. And like the people in Ohio right now, their water is totally
Hmm.
contaminated. And it's natural if you have empathy to feel empathetic towards somebody and to feel, want more for them. And then you can, from that place, if you're in the inner adult, then you can make decisions based from on that place, from that mindset, from that state of being. Um, so for instance, with Ohio, I can tune into myself and say like, okay, I feel terrible for them, but instead of I can feel my energy going there, I can call my energy back to me. A technique I really like is to imagine a big sun above my head and a mat like way like let's say 6 feet above, and imagine all my energy coming back to me from anywhere I left it, and anything that isn't mine burns off. And then I breathe in the light.
Mm.
That's the next step, is the most important, breathing in the light of your own energy, because that's your highest, that sun is your highest energy. So that's something. And then just like feeling your boundaries. But um but yeah, you can know that if it's like you're finding yourself collapsing, that's a trigger, that's an inner child picture, that it might be something like I'm not safe unless everybody around me is in agreement with me.
That's, yeah.
Yeah. Not to read your energy, but
It's so layered. It is so like as soon as I think I have one something healed, it's like a new layer pops up. And it's
that's
crazy.
yeah. You know, yeah, and I want to say two things about that. One, I was in meditation yesterday and I had this image. I could feel my energy expanding, like my ability to hold more space expanding. And what I saw was that when anyone does that, when you're like working on manifesting, or and you're feeling more of yourself, feeling more of your authentic self, what happens is it as that expands, it reveals more inner child parts that aren't in alignment with that. So it's like you basically are revealing inner child wounds as you get bigger. But it does,
Okay.
so you could look at it like, oh, there's always something else.
Always, or it
Yeah.
feels frustrating every time you up level because it's like so many issues just start to
Right.
reveal themselves.
And it's hard not to feel frustrated about that. But if instead, if it was more normalized that, oh, that's the human process, we're not, our existence isn't about, I don't believe, getting somewhere and then being there. It's really about unfolding more of who we are. And so if
Hmm.
that was more normalized, like, oh yeah, oh okay, there's this thing coming up. And also if we like there's this, hurt part coming up. Okay, how can I show up for myself more kindly? I am a big believer in self-compassion as a healer as opposed to tough love. I just feel like for most people that's what works. But if it was more like if we didn't moralize feelings either, that, oh God, here's my anger. Ugh, that's bad. It's like, no,
Hmm.
oh, there's some anger coming in. Okay, what am I needing? And of course, I'm not saying I do this perfectly all the time, but the more I normalize it, the less I'm triggered by my own growth.
Hmm.
you know,
Okay, I love that.
yeah.
So for me, what I'll say, the inner child is still relatively new,
Mm-hmm.
that work, but the chakras, working on my chakras through yogic practices is what really got me into my spiritual awakening, I would say. I had a
Nice.
friend and she got me into Kundalini yoga about
Oh,
5 years
great.
ago, and my life totally changed. But what I'll say through the chakras, it connecting to my root and working through my root, it did wonders for my anxiety because I've
Mm,
struggled with anxiety
yes.
and depression pretty much my whole life. But I can honestly say all of the root chakra work, it was so soothing to my nervous system.
I bet.
And I feel like I've got that tool that when I get nervous, I can work through my root and I feel
Nice.
so much better.
What do you do?
It's like a rocking back and
Oh,
forth and then the
nice.
little
Oh, yeah.
circles and
Nice. Yeah.
but so I kind of know how working through the energy of the chakras helped me through yoga. What does your healing look like
Like my own personal.
in terms of working with the chakras
Yeah.
and maybe
Well,
tell everybody what chakras are just in case we're throwing some new
yeah.
stuff out.
They're energy vortexes in our energy field. The main seven ones are associated. Well, the first five are actually connected to your spine, and the root is at the base of your spine. The second one is the sacral. Third one is the solar plexus, and there's the heart, the throat, the third eye, and the crown. And they're all associated with different feelings and processes. So, for instance, the third chakra is often about power and willpower, but also power over or from other people. So, they all have different themes. And so, it makes sense for you that the anxiety was so healed with the root because the root's about survival and safety. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're and also moved around and the body, the physical body really affects it. So there's so much that we store in our physical bodies that are associated with the chakras, but by just putting your attention on them, they help move the energy. So in the chakras too. So you don't have to know exactly. You can also just like notice, where am I holding tension right now? And then just putting your attention on it helps relieve it. I'm a big proponent of gold light. It's such a cleanser and it's so easy if you just remember to breathe in light. I like to breathe in light to my chakras. I have a chakra meditation where it's basically going through each chakra, imagining gold light in them, and then it's clearing it out. And any cords, you don't even have to see it, but oftentimes a lot of people do,
Mm-hmm.
just by
Yeah,
putting your
I
attention
see
in.
it. The visualizations that I have done, I've done a few
Nice.
of the meditations and I do see the chakras in the light.
Nice. See, that's amazing. Yeah, you should. The school that like I said, I didn't go to it, but I do now still take classes there sometimes for continuing ed. But it's called Psychic Horizons, and there's one in
No.
San Francisco, which is the one I'm associated with. And then there's one in Colorado. The one in Colorado is cheaper, but they have a slightly different. I don't like it as much. It's slightly less bound. There's good and bad in both of them. But anyway, but you learn that technique. Um, and it's really, really helpful to it's amazing how just not, you don't have to know intellectually why it's working or what's happening. Just having the intention to clear it out, using the light, you can ask yourself, like, well, do I feel lighter? Do I feel different? To me,
Mm-hmm.
that's what matters. Like, if I'm feeling lighter, then something's happening. Or even if I'm feeling worse, something happened. Maybe something got kicked up that wants to be cleared out.
Yeah. And I think that's probably what happens a lot when people start to do this work. Maybe they do feel a little worse. Would you
Yeah.
say?
Yeah. Well, it depends the kind of work. Like I I'm just trying to think here. I mean, like oftentimes you'll hear people, if they go to therapy, they'll sometimes feel worse before they feel better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it really depends, I think. I mean, like working, I'm not trying to say like it's always a walk in the park with me, but I really do try. I give people tools, which is different than therapy, and I'm all for therapy, but so that it's not like, oh God, now I'm just sitting in this stuff, you
That's
know?
what I couldn't stand about therapy. I just felt
Yeah,
more like a victim. I felt like life happened to me and they didn't
right.
give me any tools there to deal with it. It was just like, yeah, what happened to you? That's bad. And like,
Right.
let's rehash it. And then you
That's
leave
bad.
and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
what do I
I
do with
mean,
this?
yeah, exactly. I mean, um I am always hesitant to be I'm not critical of therapy. I think it is an amazing first step for people because I do think, again, in our society, the brain is so over identified with and so valued as being like, well, you can think your way out. Like if you, if you can mentally figure this out, that's how you should do it. And all of the other processes are just like thought of as not as important. I know I keep saying that, but the reason I'm saying that, I think it's really important because by normalizing this stuff, it's like you value it. If you are ready to dismiss
Mm,
it, then you're not going to give
you're
yourself
not.
the opportunity to have that. And so yeah, so the therapy is amazing. Like at first I really needed that so that somebody could say like, yes, this is what happened to you, because I was blaming myself so much. So having somebody who, was educated in the psych, like however there's in the psyche and with narcissism, and telling me intellectually why it wasn't okay, I needed that. But then very quickly, like you, it's like, well, but now what? Like I remember this one therapist said to me, she was joking and she was like, you need an exorcism, because my mom's voice was just like in my head all the time. And I was like, I do need an exorcism. How do I do that? I mean, not actually, but I did by doing energy healing, by knowing how to separate my energy from other people, from, you do energetically need to also, I mean, you don't need to, but for me, it's an extremely valuable tool.
Hmm.
I can't remember what the question was. Damn it. This is my ADHD.
I
I'm like,
know, I'm
where did I
horrible
go?
too. I'm
Oh,
horrible.
therapy. That's what I was saying. Yeah, just that it is valuable at first, I think, for lots of people. But oh, you were asking about, does it feel worse before it feels better?
Hmm.
So, yeah. So, like, for instance, if someone was like, ugh, I, I tell them, yeah, I see that your mom, let's say, never didn't value you, was very invalidating, and, that really happened. Then if they were in therapy, then they'd be like, okay, am I allowed to swear in here? I don't know.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
They'd be like, shit, well, now what? Like, like happened to you. But if you have other tools, like, okay, well, now we'll, do an energy clearing so her energy isn't in your space. And now you can connect to that part of you that's still very much alive in your field, the inner child, and comfort her and talk to her so that you have these tools so it doesn't feel so like, oh my God, everything's bad. But you may have to go through a period where it's like, it's hard to, um, come to terms with the fact, if you've been denying that your childhood wasn't giving you everything you needed, or if your parent was abusive and you've been denying that to yourself, yeah, there probably will be a time of grief and where it doesn't feel good. But you're basically standing in it anyway, unconsciously, if you're in that place. So by clearing it out, it's like, okay, I'm more aware of it, but it's on its way out, as instead of like spending years in just sort of that in between purgatory of it.
Hmm. Yeah. And we're not taught that everything is stored in our body. I mean, we can see the
Right.
reaction, but it's also in our body, like our chakras or,
Yeah.
and
Well, that's, yeah. Sorry to interrupt you.
no, no.
That's the definition of trauma, is it's not the event, it's the energy still living in your body because it hasn't been, that's what trauma is. It hasn't been resolved. It hasn't been released.
Hmm.
So by feeling it in your body, it feels really shitty at first. But when you're feeling it from that self-centered, but truly that inner adult self place, it can move out feeling supported.
So you're not just saying, hey, yeah, there was a shitty situation. You actually
Right.
get to clear it.
Yeah, exactly. And some of that is by feeling those feelings, which again, I wish was normalized, because if most people, they have a feeling that feels sad, that you feel sad or angry, immediately you're like, oh, that's a bad feeling. I don't want to feel
Hmm.
it. I'm shutting it down. But if it's like, this is being a human, this is a normal part of being a human, you will feel less contracted around it. And it'll be like, oh, okay, it's up and out.
I love that. Yeah, this is just being a fucking human.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
all. Like no judgment.
Yeah.
So I'm interested. When did you always have intuitive gifts as a child, or was this something you really? I know we're all born with these
Yeah.
intuitive gifts, and they're shut down through the system. But did you see, feel things as a child too, or?
I didn't like, for instance, I'm also a medium and I do talk to dead people and I do now, um, obviously read people's energy. I didn't have the tools to do that. So I wasn't one of those people who heard dead people, but I do believe that I was so aware and sensitive to, like, I could feel my mother's energy. And this is true with a lot of people who grew up in trauma. Becoming an empath is often is a trauma response because you have to feel their energy in order to know, well, what's my next step? How do I survive? So in that sense, I did have that, but I wasn't, no, I didn't know that I could read people's energy consciously. I'll put it
Yeah,
that way.
because I think that's such a important part of people's journey. I think so many people are waking up and they're wanting to become healers. They feel called, especially a lot of the women in my life. But
Yeah.
there's this misconception that you were just born with this, because
Right.
we see the typical psychics or
Right.
the people you see on all of the medium shows.
Right.
But if you're not
Exactly.
born with this gift, but it's something you actually have to cultivate,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you can cultivate, anyone can cultivate it. And again, it's just been so westernized, like that those popular psychics, let's say, are often um legitimized just because they can see, like, oh, your loved one is telling me about a red shirt you have. Like they're often like talking about physical things, oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's proof. Okay, I can prove that because you just talked about something I can see. You
Right.
know, um, as opposed to like feeling their energy or like they're coming through like this. So it's easier to discount, like, well, sure, he's funny, but anyone can be funny or something like that. It's a language of trust, energy healing. You have to, it's more subtle, and the more you do it, you learn to trust it. But it really takes building self trust. I actually have an energy healing class myself, and I talk about that. I say, like, this class is mostly about self trust because you won't, it's about learning to trust that the information you're hearing is right. And then you can, test it out, like, because sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, because it is more subtle. But the more you learn that process, yeah, you can definitely learn it.
That's really inspiring, because I'm feeling called to find whatever
Yeah.
it is in me. And I'm trying to allow myself to trust when I channel something out in a journal, that wasn't bullshit. Like that wasn't just me. That was
Well,
something.
yeah, what I want to say about that is, like, again, it's this whole mindset, framework of um proving it. Okay, prove it. It just feels very masculine. I feel like
Yes, it
this podcast,
does.
I've talked so much about, like, all this, how it's all been so negative, but I do think it's important to talk about it. It's like we're raised in a masculine dominated society, and that's a
Well, okay,
lot.
so this is why I wanted it to
Oh,
be business podcast, because I'm like, hustle culture, grinding 9 to 5, that is not for
yes.
me. And
Right.
that's what we're trained to believe. And I've got a
Yes.
shadow. I've called myself out on the podcast before. I've had a
Mm,
shadow of being lazy because I don't operate that way, of this
right.
constant
Right.
energy. I'm not constant.
No.
And so that's
No
why I
one
started this
is. No one is.
podcast. I wanted to show women that they're not broken, that if they can't show up consistently
Yes.
9 to 5 and go, and that's not what got me where I'm at anyhow. It was like
Yeah.
you
Listening
said.
to your rhythm.
Yes. And you said being intuitive, it's all about trusting yourself. I would
Yes.
say just about, if you want to live a life of your dreams and
Yeah.
own a business, be an entrepreneur, it's about trusting yourself. Because
Yes,
how are
you
you ever
so
going to
much.
invest in yourself or your business or
Right? Yeah, it's a process of trusting yourself and not pushing. I mean, no one, and listen, the patriarchy and capitalism is designed, it can only survive if people are working nonstop. Like if well, that's what it thinks. But if you but the truth is actually if people valued their own rhythms, you often are quote unquote productive, way more productive when you're valuing your rhythms.
Ooh, I like that's a good one. Valuing your rhythm.
Yeah. I mean, it's so important. Um, again, my brain, what were we? It was, I don't remember what I'm always,
Oh, we're in trouble together because we both had
yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's right. But there's a reason we started talking about that, about not pushing forward. Oh, well, I don't remember.
But basically, I just it's so important that people realize that this stuff isn't bullshit, that this is the foundation for where you want to go. And I
Which
know
part?
you said the energy,
Oh, yeah.
the self-development, the guiding your
Yeah.
inner child, all of this, because like you said, it's just stigmatized to if you can't hear it, taste it, touch it,
Right. Then it doesn't
it's not
exist.
legitimate.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that really is I mean, but you can't like you can't see your feelings, but they exist, you know? And a lot of reading energy can be about feeling it, sensing it, not something that you can touch.
So in your podcast, I know you said a lot of the mission for you was to prove the validity of these
Well,
modalities.
it's not, I do want to say not prove, because
Uh,
I'm not interested in convincing any skeptic. I don't, if you want to be skeptical, you can be skeptical, but it's more just normalizing it and like showing people, look, look at how valuable this is. You don't have to, I mean, I guess it's semantics kind of with prove, but um, I I'm just really also passionate about not proving. Like it's like if I'm not interested in convincing skeptics, but yeah, just showing like how valuable it is and how life-changing it is, because um you just can't solve emotional problems from the mental alone. You just can't. I mean, there, like I said, there's some value in it in understanding intellectually, but as far as healing it, you can't. Um, so yeah, so in my podcast, we have all different kinds of healers and witches and all different, and we also have therapists on actually too, who are trauma informed, who use different techniques and talk about the nervous system and the body. But yeah, that's why I wanted to do it.
so what's your favorite modality?
So, I obviously the ones that I do are my favorite, inner child healing and energy healing. And but I think it's like I'm very just like who whatever works for anybody, you know. It's like it depends where you are on your journey. I
Mm-hmm.
do feel that inner child healing and energy healing can work for anybody, but also if we're talking about mental health, I mean, I am a believer in medication if you need it. Like if somebody has, that's your brain chemistry. Like sometimes people need there is good about Western medicine, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that is helpful and necessary. But I do find that the combo for me is inner child healing and energy healing, because you can really get at both. But I also do love somatic healing, like just being aware in your body, um, being really present in your body and allowing it to clear out that way by supporting yourself with empathy. That's also extremely helpful.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. And I guess would you consider working on the chakras and even kind of yoga? It is kind of somatic healing because you're,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, because I know it's a trendy word right now, the somatic thing. But
Well,
if
that's
you,
great. I wish it were. I feel like we might be in a bubble It'd be great if everybody was aware of
Yeah.
somatic healing. But
That's
it is,
true.
I actually started to learn somatic experiencing, and I was like, I'm already really doing this with energy healing, so I don't really want to do it.
Yeah.
And actually somebody there was like, yeah, there's someone like a leader in that world who has moved on to energy healing primarily because he was no it's it's the next. I mean, there's the body, but there's the body, and then there's the energy, which is sort of, it's the subtle energy body is actually what it is. um but they do work in tandem. Like if you are more, this is why I say that's what I like. But if you're somebody who is like super physically oriented, like you're very
Mm-hmm.
much about the body, then it is good to start with somatic healing, I think, and to like feel into where am I holding this in my body. And then probably, because as we talked about, there's so many layers, you might end up coming to energy healing. Or but even in the somatic work, the inner child was, I mean, because yeah, when I was learning it, I was like, they were like, okay, talk to this, the tension in your body. I'm like, well, that's the inner child, you know? So the inner child is part of all of it.
I feel, yeah, I think you,
What were you going to
I
say?
said, well, um, what I'm saying is I used to always try to intellectualize it in some other more complex way. And now
Mm,
that I'm getting into this, I see that more and more.
interesting. Yeah. Intellectualizing will really get you in circles.
Well, yeah, just like how I can intellectualize, how does it help me to suffer when others are suffering? That makes no sense, right? I can't
How does
help
it
someone
help?
from
Oh,
when I was talking like the boundaries and the codependency that
right.
I find myself, it can for some reason block me off and cause me to self-sabotage because of the guilt. I can
Right.
intellectualize and say, okay, that makes no sense. How is you
Right.
being miserable going to help someone else? But
Right.
then, like you said, it's a whole, you've got to integrate it
Well, it's
further.
just, yeah, and it's actually doesn't have to be a whole thing. It's actually simple. It's an inner child part that's trying to keep you safe for some reason, and it needs something. So you can just talk to that part. I mean, it's not always that easy, but yeah, you can just talk to the part.
Mm-hmm.
And like you saw, like I said, for you, and it seemed to resonate with you, it's an inner child part that doesn't feel safe if other people are not happy, like if other people aren't in agreement with you, with an agreement with your energy.
Mm-hmm. So, for anyone feeling called to get more
Oh,
into, oh,
no, sorry, I just wanted to
go.
say real quick, I just realized, like, you could say that's also an intellectual understanding of it, but the healing is when then you connect to that part, to and she really feels like, oh, it's okay, I'm safe with you, and that can help you to relax. So
Yeah, and you feel that in your body. You
yes,
feel that
exactly.
release in your body. You might cry, you might, yeah, you feel lighter.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. So, do you have any advice to someone that feels called to step out into this space and become a healer in some capacity? Just
Mm.
how do you get started?
Yeah, well, with any entrepreneurial adventure, it's kind of different for everybody. But I would just say, I think it's really important to learn some things, and that, like, for instance, I learned tools. Um, so whatever you're passionate about, just follow that, see, how can you learn it, become really good at it. And then from there, I mean, what I did, my process was to start. I had been actually doing it for years and years and years just for me. It was me and my teacher, former teacher. We would just trade with each other every week, which we still actually do, not quite weekly, but um and then at some point I was like, I want to do this. So then, even though I had all that experience, I was doing it for, I just sent out a mass email basically to everyone I knew. And I was like, okay, I'm doing this. And I charged just a little amount. Um, and then started practicing on them. And then when I felt good, I mean, you're never maybe going to feel 100% ready. Although, like I said, I was an unusual circumstance because it had literally been like a decade or more that I've been doing it, but for myself. But um,
Mm.
once you feel better, then you can, okay. Because I mean, there is an ethical, I think, um, part of this, which is you don't want to just like run out there and do it. Depends on what the work is, I guess. If it's tarot or something, like if it's not as deep in terms of like looking at people's wounds all the time.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what you're doing, I guess. But I do think there's an ethical component of making sure that you know how to care for the other person, you know how to hold space, you know how to have boundaries. I think that's really the most important part. um and what I did was I just did a sliding scale first, and then um I really felt it internally each time when I was at my next step with it.
You felt confident to
Well,
charge more and
yeah, I mean, really, it's funny because it's not even, I wouldn't even say confident, and it always happened all at once. It was more like I can't do this at this price anymore. Like the energetic exchange just felt like know that what I'm giving is extremely valuable, and also I feel drained at this
mm-hmm.
rate. Like it just wasn't serving me anymore. And as soon as I would change it, the last time I changed it, I did panic. Like I did, it really, talk about up leveling. It was like I had so much insecurity come up. But it actually people didn't really miss a beat. And I felt so much better. I was like, okay, I feel good showing up now. Like I feel, energized, and I feel excited about this. Whereas before I was starting to feel not resentful to my clients, but just sort of like, like I'm giving too much and not getting
Right.
enough back.
So kind
So
of like the indicator is when you start to feel drained and resentful. That's when you know it's time
it's
to.
time. That may be like, I mean, other people may not need to be that extreme, but I do think, as far as resentful, for instance, this last time so I raised the rate for my single sessions, and then I just raised the rate for my mentorship, and I didn't feel resentful, but I did feel drained. That's how I knew. I was like, okay, here we go again. Like, and it's not comfortable to raise my rates. Um,
How did you work through that fear?
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I feel like every time it's different. Like the last time when I raised my single rates, I was worried about the life of my business. I was like, oh my God, no one's ever going to schedule again. Even though people were, I still felt
Mm-hmm.
like this panic, like this isn't going to last. Um, and then how did I work through it? I mean, it's a lot of inner child work, and also just my reality, over time. It was like, okay, and also I would check in with myself. Okay, remember how I felt? Like, do I feel comfortable with this new price? Like, forgetting all the issues. Like, how do I feel right now with this price? This feels right. This feels good. Okay. And I would kind of test like less, more. No, this is it.
So I'm curious, what was it like? You said you're really flowy and feminine. So what was it like to write a book? Did you have to like really get into your masculine or did
Oh,
you allow
that's
yourself?
interesting. Well, I've always been a writer, and before I did this, I actually was a comedy writer. So and I've always been a writer from the time I was very little. Like that's how I would entertain myself. So writing is actually feels very flowy to me. It doesn't feel masculine at all. It's just like boom, it comes out. The only Yeah, and I think I was gonna say the only masculine, if we're gonna call it that, part of it is the organizing, like the commitment.
The commitment
But
and the deadlines is what I was
right,
thinking. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So because I had a publisher who was like an editor who was waiting on me, that was enough of um motivation. Maybe it was an inner child motivation, but it was like, I don't want to be, you know, um, like the bad person who's sending in her deadlines late. And also, I was really excited about the book, and I want it to get out there, and I want to share it. So it was exciting for me, and it just was kind of a no brainer. When I'm doing it for myself, like right now, I'm writing someone. Um, I'm writing a book proposal for another publisher, and um, there's not a deadline there, and so that has been slipping through the cracks a little more because I know I'm not disappointing her. But I am also really excited about this book. But it's just, this is part of why I also um close my books for single readings, because I was like, I have no time. I'm not putting time into the other things that I want to be creating. So yeah, so that's already starting to shift.
That's all very exciting. That's goals for one of these days. I want to have enough material to write a book. I just feel called. So that's
You should
very
start.
expansive.
Just start. And
Yeah,
that's how the material will ironically not materialize until you start.
that's very true.
I also have my Mars in Aries, which, if anyone knows astrology, it's like a very like go 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 do the thing. So I think that really helps balance out the rest of my astrology, my like flowy astrology.
Yeah, I need to get my full chart. I still haven't done that. I know my
Yeah,
sun, moon, and
it's
rising, and I know human design, but I haven't
yeah,
gotten my chart. So,
it's just fun to know. Like,
yeah,
oh, okay, maybe that's why I do that.
yeah. Okay. So, before we wrap it up, I didn't know if you just have anything coming through that you feel like you need to share, or maybe even a little energy that you're feeling for this month.
Oh, energy for the month.
Any
Well,
report?
I actually write an energy report for Mind Body Green so people can read it. And
Okay.
I give the energy report for the month and also on my podcast every
Yes,
week.
I've heard them on your podcast.
Yeah. Um, so I'm just kind of feeling into it. Yeah, it's been pretty foggy. Like we started off January pretty foggy, and even though I don't know, like I've been so busy and the energy has really picked up, I feel like in February, but feels, it still feels a little foggy to me in terms of like emotionally, like, what it feels like is there's stuff, if we could look at it in terms of how we've been talking about it, like in the subconscious that's sort of in the air, but not fully awakened yet, not fully, um clear yet, and it feels to me like this is just sort of like a mucky soupy time a little bit where like the energy's starting to move, which is creating this maybe more awareness, but it hasn't cleared yet for us to be like,
Mm,
oh, that's why that happened, or oh, this is what I want this next step to be, or it's just sort of, it feels a bit like of an uncomfortable time right now still, like not quite, just I call this kind of thing the messy middle, like having more awareness about what is going on, but not knowing the next steps yet and not fully being in
mm-hmm.
that place yet. But it does feel like in March, things start to, like, the cloud lifts and things get more clear.
I'll be looking forward to that.
We
And your
all
energy's pretty on. I remember
know.
back in December, you're like, it feels like just, I don't know, I want to be in a cave. I was like, totally. I
Yes.
couldn't even be bothered to like text people Merry
Yes.
Christmas, Happy Holidays. I was like,
Oh.
I totally fell off the face of the earth.
Oh my gosh, me too. Like just the middle of January, I suddenly started to wake up again. I was like, oh yeah, there's lots of people I was talking to that I'm not talking, that I just like can't have forgotten about. Yeah.
Well, do you have any last words you want to share?
Yeah, I think I said a lot.
Wisdom? You did.
I said it all.
Okay. Well, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me at Highest Light Healing on Instagram and I'm kind of newly to TikTok now, where I do sort of like, I just will share some insights that I've had on there, and same with Instagram, but I don't talk as much on there. And on my website, highestlighthealing.com. And yeah, I have my mentorship right now. It's the next opening isn't until April, but if you want to know about that, you can look on the website. And I have some, oh, and my book.
Your book,
That's the
yeah.
big thing. Yeah, Healing Your Inner Child. If you put it on Amazon, you then also put my name, Natasha Levinger. And if you pre-order it, you can, I'm sending out this class of meditation that I just created about inner validation. Yeah, as you know, meditations are so helpful, and
They are.
I really love this one. So yeah, it's a little impetus to go get that. I
Yeah, go get
really
her
appreciate
book.
it.
We all
Yes.
need it. We all need to heal our inner child. That's for
And
sure.
pre-orders are so helpful. So yeah, I really appreciate it if you do. And let me know. I'd love to. Yeah, just email me and then I'll send you that class.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of your beautiful wisdom today. And
Thank you.
maybe we can talk after your book comes out and I get the chance to read that too.
Yeah. Actually, I can send you a PDF of it. I realized that earlier. I was like, oh, I should have done that.
Okay.
My dogs are barking. All right. Thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much for stopping by this week. I make no money from this show. Actually, it costs me money to produce and host. So the best way you can show your support for this passion project of mine is by leaving the show a 5-star written review on Apple. Also, if you would like to contribute monetarily to the show, you can leave a tip in my digital tip jar, which I have the link in the show notes. You can always share it with a friend who you think could benefit from the message, or even better, you can take a screenshot of this episode, upload it to your Insta stories, and tag me in it at Designing Vibes. Sending you my love.